Hi everyone and welcome to the Women's Table podcast. My name is Tina de Keyzer and I am your host. Today with me having a seat at the table is Dr. Verena Seibel, 34 years old. She's an assistant professor at the University of Groningen in the field of sociology. She's originally from Germany and moved to Groningen in 2018. She's married and has 2 children, aged 4 and 1. She considers herself a feminist and has always had an interest in gender issues and inequalities related to gender, particularly within the workplace. Verena has lived in multiple places such as the United States, Germany, and now the Netherlands. She therefore is fascinated by the cultural differences in the perceptions of gender roles and how it impacts life choices of men and women. Today, Verena and I will be talking about women and gender expectations on the work floor. So before we start, Verena, I would like to say welcome and thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tina, for the invitation. I'm very much looking forward.
Verena, we talked before and we agreed to look at 3 questions and some statements regarding our main topic, women and gender expectations on the work floor. So the first question is, what are the gender-related prejudices and expectations on the work floor? Do they come more from men, women, or both equally? And what is the impact of those prejudices on women and their decisions about their careers, family, or the combination of both?
So I think the gender-related prejudices we have at the work floor origin, of course, from our gender-related prejudices in the society, meaning that women are expected to be soft, warm, harmony-seeking, men are considered to be strong, authoritarian, and ready to lead. You find those prejudices at the workforce, in private life, everywhere. However, it really has, of course, tremendous consequence, and I'm already kind of jumping a bit now to your second part of the question. So there have been also studies, research, experiments based on this, and they also find that men are perceived as more competent than women. So even if you consider everything else equal, so they made experiments with CVs where the whole CV is completely equal. They just change the gender, and then men are perceived more competent as women. So this is, of course, related to the prejudices we have. We also just talked about it. How do you want to address me as with my doctor title? And I mean, there's also this fascinating but also tragic research showing that when women speak, they are significantly less likely to be called on by the doctor title than men. A public discussion that men are all the time introduced. Oh, here we have Dr. Phil, la-di-da, and then the women are introduced like, here's Lisa. And so this already really shows how our biases actually shape how we perceive men and women. It's also interesting, women have the same bias. So also women perceive men as more competent and as a leader. In men, we often trust that they can do their job, and women have to prove it. That's quite often the case. I don't think it has something evil intention. It is just that we are primed that when men speak up in a field where they show competence, we just expect that he is an expert in this and that he has a doctor title in this field. And we don't have the same expectations towards women. We are still perceived being as female professions. It's really the gender always is attached to us. And this, of course, has a really tremendous consequences in how we behave in the work phase. So we women are always aware of our gender constantly, be it in the meeting, be it in when we are in the elevator, when we have a discussion. It is permanent something which we are aware of, and men have the luxury not to think about their gender. Now we push them a bit. With the whole Me Too debates, we kind of force them, guys, you also have to consider that gender has a huge impact on our lives. And it's of course now also getting uncomfortable for men. So we also find this strong resistance that men don't like to think about their gender and their role as men in society because it's uncomfortable. And no one gets that more than we do because we do it constantly. But it is something typical female, and I'm pretty sure every woman relates to that we think about how do we dress, how do we come across when we negotiate, are we too soft, are we perceived as too feisty? These are just the issues we have to think about simply just because we're women.
So do you think that is one of the reasons that women earn less than men, because we don't want to put up a fight about our salary?
Oh yeah, definitely. I know this from my own experience, but also when I talk to my friends. I mean, there's also tons of research about that. I mean, this is really the women like to please. It's difficult or more difficult for us to really fight for what we want, to really tell a person like the HR department, well, this is what I'm worth. So this is definitely part of the problem. However, I'm also a bit always careful because, I mean, we should not blame the women. Yeah, it's also, of course, why isn't there fair salary from the beginning? Why does HR offer women lower wages from the start off? Yeah, why do we have to fight for equal wages? That's already ridiculous.
When you think of the gender differences, I read the other day an interesting article that said that when men speak about their knowledge, their expertise, and they get angry, people, women included, think of it as, okay, well, he stands for something. When women get angry, people think, women included, again, think, oh, she's emotional. She is not fit to talk about it because her emotions get the better of her. And when men get angry, it is okay. It is accepted.
Yeah, that is a really problematic observation because as a woman, you cannot win.
Yeah.
And so you either don't put up a fight and then you don't bring the story across you want to bring across, or you don't win the negotiations, or you put up a fight, then you are perceived as a person you really don't like. Months ago, a year ago, I watched a presentation by Professor Petra Rudolph. She's a professor for physics at the Groningen University, but she's also interested in those gender-related issues. And she made a really nice presentation about unconscious bias in the workforce and in academia particularly. And she also said it's really for women often a trade-off between competence and likability. Women are perceived as competent if they not only show they can do the job, but they also need to show that they are warm, they have those female traits. And women who lack, I put this now in quotation marks, female traits, who have a third personality, who say what they want, who have like those male traits or what we attribute to men and not to women, they are perceived as not likable. And then we could say, okay, who cares? Men don't care whether they be liked. Why should we care? But it matters because our performances are well evaluated worse. In academia, for example, becomes really prevalent is how students evaluate female and male teachers. So at the university, and there's also tons of research done on this where they really looked into it, and men always, but not always, of course, on average, perceive better evaluations than women. And women are punished for being outspoken, for being not nice enough, for being not warm enough. And women are, of course, aware of that, at least subconsciously. And this makes it for us sometimes really exhausting because we have to make this balance between we want to be competent, but we also want to be a person that is respected. And of course, we also want to be liked. I mean, this is also something women care about. It's we want to have harmony.
Yeah, it's like you say, we cannot win.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought about a few prejudices regarding gender-related issues, women on the work floor. So these are a few prejudices I came up with. Women need to take care of the kids. Women cannot have it all, a family and a career. They can have a family and a job, but not a career. If women want to have a successful career, they cannot have kids because that is selfish. If women want to have children and a job, it should be a part-time job. Do you think women, when they work part-time, do you think they want to work part-time, that it is a choice? Or do you think women are actually forced by society to work part-time because that is what you do when you're a mom? Or because you earn less, that when one of the parents need to decide who is going to stay home, it will be automatically be the woman, the mother, because she earns less. What do you think?
This is, of course, a complex question. It's often actually a mix of all. Now, on the one hand, you have those economic inequalities. It's just rational that the person who earns less, if we think as a family, we want to provide our children something, it makes sense that she cuts down her working hours. Secondly, of course, it is strongly related to the expectations we have towards mothers and how they should fulfill their role at home. This is really one of the strongest aspects. I became really aware of that when I moved to the Netherlands, where I could see how culture is actually determining our actions in such a crazy way. But in Germany, the norm is that as a mother, you stay at home at least a year, if not even longer. But if they go to work, the children, they go to daycare 5 days a day, often 6 to 8 hours. In the Netherlands, I was first shocked that women go back to work after 3 months. That would be unthinkable in Germany. But then they work part-time, and the children often go to daycare only 1 or 2 days. And in the Netherlands, it's considered absolutely cruel to send your child to daycare 5 days. So our poor daughter was actually for a really long time the only child in her daycare who actually went 5 days to daycare. And I've been told bluntly in my face that I cannot work 5 days as a mom. Like, this is undoable. Then there you really notice that how culture really plays a role, because at the end, everyone wants to do what's best for the family, for the children. No one really knows what is best.
Yeah.
But it's the culture which tells us when we should go back to work and how much we should work. And this part-time culture is, of course, in the Netherlands really dominant. There was also this documentary on NOS, Waarom werken vrouwen niet? They had 4 episodes and tried to look at, okay, what is it actually about the Dutch part-time culture? And then if you ask a woman, often they say they want that. They think this is best for their families. On the one hand, you can say, yes, it is a personal choice. It is an individual choice. On the other hand, then also, when you look at the circumstances at the workforce, you also see it's made really difficult for women to work more than, 3 or 4 days. And to have a family. The workplace is still designed for men. The tasks you have to do are, so if I take academia, for example, this is a really intensive, demanding job. It is a job actually which expects of you to work 50 to 60 hours if you take it really seriously. If you have children, and if you're not in the luxury position as most men are, who have a spouse at home who does the majority of the caretaking, then you immediately lose. Combined then with those issues we just talked about, that the workforce also sometimes it's really exhausting for women. It is often unfair. We experience sexism, all those factors. I also understand that women then say, okay, this is just too much. I can't have it all. Indeed, I cannot perform. I cannot give 100% in the job. And then what everything else is expected from me at home. Because women are still doing the large share of work with the children, with the households, etc. And I mean, when we look at the burnout numbers, also in the Netherlands, for example, women have double as likely to get a burnout than men. And I just assume that one of the reasons is actually that, it's really demanding to have both. It's complicated. Is it a personal choice or not? The chances are not equal for men and women from the workforce.
No, that's correct. The inequality is that men can have it all, but women cannot.
Yeah, the source is also really in the work regulations. So when you look at the Netherlands, for example, fathers have been until recently, I think, entitled only to 2 weeks of paternal leave when the baby is born. And after that, you have the right to go on parental leave for another 3 months, which you can distribute over the year, however you want it. But it depends on the employer whether this is paid or not. So this is already something which is always goes against families. If you don't have a financial substitution for someone staying at home, always contributes to inequalities, because then you have exactly this decision: who stays at home, the person who earns more or the person who earns less, and it often, of course, the woman. Since I think last year, men now, and I think this is a really important legislation change in the Netherlands, have the right to stay at home, I think 5 to 6 weeks paid when a baby is born. So we also have the legal arrangements so that men also are allowed and can actually are enabled to take the same share of caretaking of their children than our women. And as long as we don't guarantee that, there will be this inequality. Although, interestingly, I must have to say, in Germany, actually, it is both for men and women possible to take parental leave. You have, as a couple, 14 months, which you can split up however you want. The only rule is that one partner has to do at least 2 months. But what happens is still that women stay at home for 12 months and the men do 2 months. So that they come up to those 14 months together. And although in Germany it's actually possible that you divide your hours however you want, it is not the case that couples do this equally. Although they have the chance, it is still not done.
Mm-hmm.
Men say that they still feel awkward when they ask for this parental leave. They are signaled by the employer, yeah, you're entitled to this, but actually they signal them that their career will suffer. Yeah. Which is something women we just accept it because also we feel like we don't have a choice. Men, of course, they're not ready there to accept it all. Why should they? Yeah. Why should you be punished for being a parent? So yeah, it's a complex, it's complex.
Also, if you say that it is cultural related, research by the World Bank in 2019, the research was done among 187 countries all over the world. And it proved that there are only 6 countries in the whole wide world, just 6, Verena, just let that sink in for a moment, in which the law regarding gender equality is actually implemented in such a way that those laws are of influence on the work floor. I think that is quite shocking.
That is really shocking.
Those 6 countries are Belgium, Denmark, France, Latvia, Luxembourg, and Sweden. The research was based on the rights to pension, paid maternity leave, the right to work wherever you want to work, the right to choose if you want to become an entrepreneur.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the pension, of course, this is also really, really good example, which puts many women into devastating situations. Because in the Netherlands, you have this ground pension, which everyone gets if you live here for 45 years or something. But it's, of course, not enough. So you have to build up something additionally, which you do with your employer. Basically, the system is designed for the male pathway who works for 40 years continuously without a break. It's not a reality anymore. Also not a reality for many Dutch men, actually. So I think 25 to 30% of Dutch men nowadays also work part-time. But if you have a law like this, then of course at the end, when it comes to old age pensions, women really have a problem. Old age related poverty is a female issue because of this. We also have to think about how can we create those legislations that they really also adjust the needs of the other half of the population. Of course, things like home office, as you say, this is super relevant. This is something women often prefer to kind of combine it with their care work. But my perception is that Dutch people perceive them as rather liberal and equal. It's difficult for the Dutch to accept that those inequalities, which are really severe, that they still exist. I'm also often astonished when I talk to my female colleagues, and we talk about those injustices, which are also often really based on legal regulations, that they also perceive that as unfair, but they also, okay, this is just how it is, and I don't want to make a fuss, and I don't want to be the difficult one, and I don't think that this is really particularly a Dutch behavior. I think this is more a female behavior. I think you find this in other countries too. I was surprised when I moved here and I got my second daughter here, and I felt personally how the legislations are not in favor of women and mothers in particularly. I was really surprised because I was expecting something else from the Netherlands. Yeah, maybe also a bit like the assumptions we have ourselves, what we are as a society, and that we perceive the Netherlands as a really free society and we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
Workplace is still not designed in such a way that women have the same chances as men. This is, of course, a bitter pill to acknowledge.
Yeah.
But I find it a really interesting statistic.
Due to the pandemic,
Yeah,
because of the pandemic, almost everyone has to work from home. Do you see this as a chance for women to get to work full time, maybe earn some more or equal pay, the same as men? Because if they can work from home, they don't need to bring their children to daycare because daycare is really expensive. I talked to this woman and she said she has to work actually 3 days because if she works full time, 5 days a week, and she brings her child to daycare, it will cost her more than when she stays home 2 days. Yeah. So do you think that due to the pandemic and people keep working more from home, that this is an opportunity for women to work from home full time and still can have their kids at home.
The problem with that is that when you have children at home, you cannot work. So that's a bit that's a difficulty. I mean, if they are 12, 13, and they can maybe entertain themselves and do their homework themselves. But I mean, the problem we had, particularly during the first lockdown, where everyone was at home, it really brought the parents to their limits, and particularly the mothers, because it is impossible. You cannot have a conversation like we now have when you have a toddler running around. Research really shows like this motherhood penalty. That was research done for women and men and fathers and mothers in academia, and both lost productivity during the pandemic, so also fathers, but women significantly more. There are also other studies which show that during the first pandemic, actually men submitted 30% more papers to journals, whereas for women it stagnated. So for some men, this was indeed the chance. So now they're at home, they don't have all those distractions they have at workplace. They have their wife who takes care of the children, and they really got it on. I don't know any woman with children who had this kind of experience. For us, it was extremely exhausting. I have a colleague who does research on this, actually, exactly on this question. And if I remember what they found, if the pandemic, to some extent, it had equalizing effects because men were also at home and they also had to take care of stuff. And then also we have to consider that during the pandemic, the jobs, which we say system relevant, are female dominated jobs. So it were actually the women who had to go on the workforce, nurses, cashiers in the healthcare sector. So the effects are actually quite mixed. So to one extent, there is a bit shift towards equality. There's also other research which really says men contributed a bit more in the household, but women even more. So homeschooling, for example, is apparently still, I mean, I don't have children in school, a female issue. And then to combine this with your work,
yes, it is.
It's challenging. So we will definitely see consequences of that.
I have another question. I'm reaching back now to the research by the World Bank. And, the vice president, who happens to be a woman, said that if women would get to work and paid the same salary as men globally, the world economy would grow with 140 billion euros.
Oh.
So that is a lot of money. Yeah, that is a lot of money. You would think that it would be in everyone's interest, in society's interest, if women would get to work and get paid more or get paid equally. I'm just curious, why is it that women are not motivated or stimulated to get to work? In fact, I have a feeling because they earn less, that they are being demotivated. And daycare is very expensive. Why is this? Is this because of the patriarchy? And if it is, what is it exactly that men gain from keeping women from working and keeping them at home?
Yeah, this is a complex question. So I think, obviously, the economy would benefit from working women.
Yeah.
On the other hand, work is also always related with power. And then, of course, gender comes into play. We still have to get used to women in power positions. Men have to get used to having their spouses in power positions. For example, economically, also for a family, it would often make more sense that both work part-time. So if you have family, for example, and you say, okay, we somehow need to juggle everything. And so we also want to see our children. So how do we do this? Both work part-time, like 80%. Are able to continue with the career, climb up the career ladder, have a really good income, still being able to care for their family. Parents don't do that. So again, it's about culture and perceptions. But they just know better how to do it with the household. They're intuitively better with the children. I mean, those aspects are extremely, really within us, and it's really difficult to distance yourself from that. I remember when my husband was in parental leave with our first daughter. It was super convenient for me. I was working my 8 hours. I got the respect at work. I was productive. I was someone. I came home. Dinner was ready. Things were washed. My child was cared of by a loving parent. I mean, it's really nice. And we sometimes joke at home that my poor husband doesn't have this luxury like others. I would not say men keep their women at home. I mean, luckily we don't live in the 50s anymore, or like in the 70s where this was definitely still the case, where you needed your husband's approval to go working. Women have expectations towards their own role. We don't like to be demanding. We don't want to overburden men. And so you of course have those gender perceptions and biases which play a big role. On the workforce, I don't have the feeling that men deliberately keep women out of something. In my field, it is not. It might be in male-dominated branches where men really make sexist behavior so explicit to make the woman really uncomfortable. At least this is what, when you see research about women in engineering, for example, in academia, this is really not the case anymore. Men just are often in power, in a better position, and it's easier for them to go forward. Yeah, they have networks play a huge role, for example, and networks is still something which is incredibly important in the workplace. It's no one's fault. It's not like that anyone says, oh, we don't want to have the women here. It's personal connections. It's also stuff like what I experience, for example, that when men out of the workplace, when they socialize, that is sometimes in a setting which is uncomfortable for women. For example, sometimes deliberately did not participate in social activities out of the workforce because they were really late at night. They were in an apartment of the professor. Not that I feared anything, but it is a setting where as a young woman, you would say, where you feel like, there's alcohol, it's late, I'm not going to do that. And then later the next day, I asked my male colleagues, hey, so what did you actually talk about? And then I heard the gossip, I heard all the strategic information, whatever was going on. But this is, of course, nothing deliberately. It's not they say, we don't want you here. It's often then men maybe then also not reflect on how such settings should be so that women feel comfortable to participate in.
I'm wondering, if you look at women in higher positions, like executive board positions, like director positions, there is a call at this moment, equality for women in those higher positions. Isn't it so that men keep women out of those positions of power? When there is a job position, when there is a job opening, they hire the guy and not the woman?
I mean, what is common to all humans is that we like people who are similar to us. If you have executive committees, which consist 95% of men who have their own style of male communication, they make jokes which are so often sexist. I mean, I also experience this so often where I also sometimes wonder, don't you think what you just said? And women are kind of settings just exotic. They are different. And they bring a different culture within. They suddenly maybe have to think about what they say, when they make remarks about, I'm now being a cliche, about their secretary. I mean, we value the contributions which we are familiar with. So if you have a typical male CV, this is something men recognize. So they say, okay, I see myself in that. So this is really a thriving person, an ambitious person. And then you have a female CV, which often looks really different, and not always because they have children. I mean, this is, of course, one of the main barriers, but also because women value different things. They maybe put more effort into building a good working community, their old workplace, which is not perceived as productive. This was maybe a time where they didn't close a deal. But closing the deal, this is what is perceived as the most important thing when you apply for certain positions. So it's really also how expectations we have about productivity, what we think it's important. But then it's also, and this really brings me back to the networks, men just often know the other guys. They understand where these guys come from. And so I give you one example when I was in the selection committee for professorship. And they were all excellent candidates. There was this one external professor. We were going for the CV, and he was like, oh, I know this guy. He's excellent. Oh, I met this guy at the conference. Oh, I worked with him. Really, really nice guy. Yeah, I mean, the guys, they were so well connected, and he didn't even have to look at the CV. He knew that these were really good candidates. But the women are not so well connected. So for the women, and I was at that time actually a gender representative, my job was to take care that women are considered equally as men. So I really had to say, okay, based on the CV, if we invite this guy, we also have to invite this woman because she is equally, if not even more competent for this job. But if I wouldn't have said that, she would have not been invited. And this is not something bad intention there. this is just how we are. I experience it similarly when I look at CVs from different countries, where it's really difficult for me to understand their productivity. Then I also prefer someone, because I'm biased, from my own culture. I prefer someone with a Dutch or a German CV or a British CV or French CV because I understand their pathway, understand their educational system. And as soon as we don't understand, then we get insecure and it becomes a risk to hire someone. And men don't understand female CVs because they're different. They're more risky to hire them.
But isn't it also risky to hire women, let's say women with a family? Years ago, I worked within this company and there was this woman and she was a senior manager and she was going for partnership. She already had 3 kids. And she was pregnant with a 4th. Colleagues of mine, associates, other partners, they were so judgmental towards her. Like, how can you have 3 kids and work 50 hours a week? And now she's pregnant with a 4th and she wants to become a partner. Don't you think that maybe on a conscious or subconscious level that it does count when it comes to choosing a partner between a woman and a man?
Yes. So I think I was also recently, poor partner has to have these discussions with me all the time. He was for a time self-employed and he also said, and he's a feminist. In my company, if we would hire someone and there would be a 30-year-old woman and a 30-year-old guy, he would say, okay, I really cannot afford, if we just started a business, we really need full manpower. I cannot afford to have someone who will say after a year, well, I'm pregnant, now I will leave the workforce for 1.5 years and then I come back 50%. It is 2 things. On the one hand, yes, women make choices with regards to work, which from the employer's perspective are sometimes perceived as harmful if they decide to leave the workforce for a longer place. On the other hand, we also have to think of, okay, how can we then design the workplace in such a way that women don't feel like they have to leave for 1.5 years or 3 years, or, now I'm speaking my German, this is how it works in Germany. How can we make it attractive that they come back earlier? And not only for women, but how can we make it attractive for men that they take care of their family too? Because we wouldn't have this bias problem if men and women would be an equal risk. If now I have a 30-year-old man and a 30-year-old woman propose the same risk to me to stay at home for 6 months. But maybe I can handle if someone goes away for 6 months, but I cannot handle for my company if someone leaves the company for 3 years. So it kind of is a devil's circle somehow. So the workplace is created in a way which is not attractive for women to come back quickly. It's not attractive for men to take parental leave, which leads for women reducing their working hours. They are feeding the prejudices we have against women. They're not ambitious enough. They don't want it. Then we don't hire them. We don't promote them as much because you never know. Maybe she gets a second. Maybe she gets a third. So it's kind of a vicious circle, which is difficult to break through.
I agree. I completely agree. Another question. Your research interest lies in the process of migrants' adaptation to the host society. So we talked about, is this gender expectations, if it is a cultural thing. Regarding your research, if it is a cultural thing, do you think it could affect the way migrants might or might not adapt to their host society? Or do you think it is also prejudiced, a biased assumption?
Yeah, this is a really important topic. So we indeed find differences between the countries in terms of gender-related attitudes. And countries which, like Morocco, Syria, Libya, those countries we are interested in, right? Arabic, North African countries, or this is what the media talks about. They indeed have more conservative gender-related beliefs and attitudes. However, we also observe they really adapt to the culture of the host country over the years and over generations, definitely, but also already for people who migrate to the Netherlands, for example. They just arrived and you ask them, okay, what should a working mother do, etc. And you ask them 10 years later, you will find a difference in their answers because, of course, they are influenced by the Dutch way. And we observe this particularly among women because female migrants, they really experience a status gain in the Netherlands. Yeah, so they perceive their possibilities they have in terms of education, in terms of employment. The Netherlands has a functioning childcare system. They are able actually to combine work and family life. So they really see the advantages of the Dutch lifestyle, also change their attitudes towards that. Men also change their attitudes, so they also become more liberal over time, however, much slower and not so intense. And one of the assumptions is also that men often experience a status loss. So whereas in their home country, they have been the breadwinner, they have been the head of the household, which are concepts which are questioned in the Netherlands. So they have to reinvent themselves also. They have to find a new identity, and which is also, of course, challenging for them. So culture definitely plays a role, but we also really see, for example, I did a study where we examined, it's a bit different topic, but attitudes towards the welfare state among migrants, and conducted a study in Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. And you can really see that over time, migrants adapt their attitudes towards the receiving country. In Denmark, people are generally more satisfied, and the migrants really, their satisfaction increases over time significantly. And more so than in Germany, because the Germans are also less satisfied with their welfare state. So immigrants also don't get super satisfied.
I think it's quite interesting because I also think that there are a lot of biased assumptions towards migrants.
Yeah, I was recently talking with a colleague, and in her appearance, she's darker skinned. And she also said to me, at the university, I'm a respected person. Everyone knows me, everyone knows who I am. But as soon as I leave the university, I'm just another brown woman on the street. And people really behave to her really, really strangely. Rude, sexist. So I was really shocked when she told me, because me as a white woman, I don't make these experiences. And if you don't make these experiences, it's really difficult to think about solutions, how you can make it better. So this is also, when we go back to the gender issue, it's difficult for men to anticipate the needs of women because they don't make those experiences. And this is why it's also so important that we bring women in positions of power, because we need a female perspective on these issues. Otherwise, there will be no changes. And we need other minorities too. We need ethnic minorities, LGBTQ, disabled people, because if you belong to a mainstream population who's really privileged, you simply don't know. I don't know how a person in a wheelchair feels. When I would be responsible in designing, the new faculty building, I probably would not really think of that, what to consider. I need a person who experienced that. So this is really, really big issue.
Thank you. Last question. So what are your own experiences with women on the work floor and gender expectations? And more importantly, did those expectations influence your own decisions regarding your personal situation?
My experiences are twofold. So on the one hand, I sometimes feel as a young intellectual woman, this is really perceived as something really positive. I do feel that there are mentors, and also had mentors, who were really supporting me and who were also to some extent aware of the struggles, or that I might be not have the right networks, etc. On the other hand, I also constantly, of course, experience paternalistic behavior, sexist comments towards my looks, my competences. But what I really hate the most is when I achieved something, when I got a position, for example, I'm told that, of course, but you're also a woman. Currently, particularly universities try to increase their female percentages. It just really devaluates my competence. When people say that, I don't get those positions because I'm a woman. I get those positions most and all because I'm good at my job. This is really what angers me, actually. When it comes to my own decisions, I think I developed some kind of now more than ever attitude. So I deliberately didn't wait to have children until I have a full professorship. I got them now because I also don't really feel that I should make a choice. And I indeed do want to have it all. And I'm aware of the costs. I really made deliberately this decision. What I noticed, though, and my partner too, when we came to the Netherlands, so when it comes to cultural differences, so the first cultural difference is the part-time culture. But another difference, and a really positive development, in my view, is that Dutch fathers are much more involved with their children than German fathers. So when you look at part-time work, for example, so I just said Dutch fathers or Dutch men, 25 to 30% work part-time in the Netherlands. And in Germany, it's 6%. So this idea of having a Papadag, which Dutch smile upon, I think it's awesome. Yeah, when I go to the playground, I see Dutch fathers, they're really engaging, they go shopping with their children. This is really something you see, of course, also in Germany, but to a much lesser extent. Yeah, we both work 50-50. So there we were really influenced by the Dutch culture. And if we now think about, do we want to go back to full time? We're both not so sure anymore. We really appreciate this part-time culture. And don't get me wrong, I don't work 80%. I mean, I still work a lot because I work in the evenings or in the weekends. Yeah, so I compensate just the different hours. Yeah. It is something which made us also question, okay, do we really need those 5 days? So which is so propaganded in Germany or also in Belgium or in France. I mean, is this really something also for your own productivity? Is this something which we should strive for? Or shouldn't we strive more for a 4-day week, for example, which allows us for much more balance with our work and private life? I mean, my husband also has colleagues who work part-time and don't have children, men, because they value their free time. They're really good workers. And and the company is doing really, really well. And in Germany, it's really still considered, okay, you can only be productive if you work 5 days full time. There's no job sharing. Like the world collapses if you work part-time. Yeah, it's really unthinkable. And the Netherlands really taught us that is this not the case. It's a question about organization, about priorities. And the Dutch are very productive despite the part-time working. Yeah. So this is really, something where we also see how culture also changed our perceptions. Also, my husband being an active father is something, here he meets other fathers on the playground. And this, of course, gives him also a sense of normality, which I think is really important. Maybe to also end it on a really positive note.
So when you say 4-day work week, that is for everyone, for men and women?
To be a good solution?
Yeah.
I would say yes. But of course it differs. I mean, some people are naturally workaholics. They don't want to have a 3-day weekend. And some say, no, I just want to work 2 days. That's already more than enough for me. So, I mean, it really depends, of course, on your individual preferences. I think if you both want to have a career, but you also want to take care of your private life, be it hobbies, be it family, or somehow. Yes. In our experience, this 4 days has been working really well.
I completely agree. I do think that time does have changed. When I wanted to work 4 days and I didn't have children at the time, people were like, why do you want to have a day off? What are you going to do that one specific day that you're at home? And I was like, excuse me?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think this really has changed. I mean, there are also super interesting experiments in different countries, in New Zealand and Sweden, where they really experiment with those 4 days working week or 6 hours a day, 5 days, but then 6 hours a day. And I find this super interesting because it really challenges our perceptions of what a work life really has to be. Yeah, and we just do what we know. So I went 5 days because this was just what I knew. Yeah, I find it really interesting if we challenge us a bit and think, okay, is this really how it has to be? Are we really productive 40 hours a week? So, I mean, who can concentrate 8 hours straight? I'm in my position in my job. I'm very lucky because my job is so flexible. So if I'm really demotivated, I go for a walk, no one cares. And I come back and I go back and continue working. But many people are not. And then they sit in front of their computers feeling demotivated. The company doesn't gain. The person doesn't gain. Yeah, and at the end, the person probably becomes ill over time because it's not a healthy behavior. So I'm actually really curious how this will develop. Yeah. Maybe in that sense, the pandemic is also helping us because since we're all working from home now, I think many companies also learned that they can trust their employees. Yeah, and that the work is done even if you don't control them every minute. So maybe this is something we would gain in the future.
I heard of this company in the United States. And the company has been rewarded with Employer of the Year a few years in a row. The working place is like a fun park. You can do whatever you want as long as you are 8 hours a day productive. So there's daycare for free. You can go golfing. You can go to the gym or do some yoga, go for a walk. But you have to be productive for 8
Mm-hmm.
hours a day. There's a McDonald's kind of restaurant, so in your lunch break, you can go and have a happy meal with
Mm-hmm.
your children. Research showed that this company is a very productive
Mm-hmm.
company.
I absolutely can imagine. I think the flexibility and to give the people
Yeah,
the autonomy to decide when they are productive is so crucial. And I mean, I would even go further. I would even say, why tell someone how many hours per day he or she has to work? You know? Why don't
yeah,
we say in a week? Because also, I mean, I sometimes
yeah,
have super productive days, yeah, where I really work
yeah,
day and night and I really achieve something.
yeah,
And then I
me
have
too.
days where I just really don't get anything done. So why should I be forced in those demotivating days to work instead of just say, I
Yeah,
do, I don't know, a mini vacation, then I come back, then I go full time. It also has pragmatic issues. And I mean, someone has to be there to answer the phone and deadlines have to be met. And
hmm,
so, I mean, you cannot be super flexible. I understand it from an employer's perspective, but I do think this autonomy to feel that you can decide about your own time is so crucial also for the
yeah.
well-being of people.
Okay, so last question before we're going to wrap up, because you mentioned when I asked you about your own experiences that you do want to have it all. So, what is your advice to women who
Mm-hmm.
struggle with the idea of wanting it all, but they are struggling with having it all? What is your advice for those women?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think particularly as a woman, I mean, you need to know what you want. So we try to do what we think is best for us,
Hmm.
career-wise, as a
Yeah,
couple and as a family. And we try not to get influenced so much by others. So ignore the voices. If you want to work 40 hours, if you have an awesome job and you have 3 children, then don't listen to the people who tell you you're a bad mother. But do that. If you feel you want to work part time, you don't have children, yeah, but this is still something you value, then this is also your choice. And don't listen to the people who tell you that you're then not ambitious. So I think this is
yeah,
really to find what you truly want and to be not guided by the expectations of others. I think this is something which we all have problems with. I don't think this is a female problem. I think men have the same issue. They have to be productive. They have to be successful in the job. Yeah. So for them, it's
yeah,
also really difficult to say, nah, but actually, I don't need to be a manager. Yeah. I'm actually fine where I am right now.
yeah,
Yeah, this was always kind of our strategy to not so much care, though I must say my husband is much better in that than I am. I still care a lot what other people think,
yeah,
and I think a lot about my role as a mother and my
yeah.
role as a female academic. I know I should care less, but I'm trying at least. Yeah.
Yeah, Verena, thank you. Thank you very much. It was lovely talking to you.
Tina, it
Thank you
was
so
really
much
nice.
for
Thank you so much.
participating.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And
Yeah,
I'm really happy that you give the floor for such an important topic. I hope that maybe we encouraged also other people to reflect on some issues. Thank you very much.
yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this very interesting podcast with Dr. Verena Seibel. In the next episodes of the Women's Table podcast, I will be talking to other interesting women about some very important women-related topics, like why women cannot work together on the work floor, truth or myth, and why are there so few women in tech positions. We will also be talking about women and motherhood, the choice to become a mom or not. So thank you for listening, and we will be back very soon.